ready to dive deep.
Let's do it.
We're tackling the unexpected education of Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And trust me, it's anything but ordinary.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going straight to the source for this one, Walter Isaacson's biography.
The audiobook is full of these amazing anecdotes.
It's like getting a glimpse behind the curtain,
Totally.
seeing the experiences that shaped this tech icon.
It's easy to think of someone like Steve Jobs as, like, destined for greatness.
Right.
But what Isaacson does so well is showing how his experiences, even from childhood, really made him who he was.
It all starts with his adoption.
Yeah.
Now, lots of people are adopted, right?
Right.
But his biological parents, they had this specific condition.
Mm.
Whoever adopted him had to promise a college education.
Wow.
Imagine being like 6, 7 years old and finding out not only were you adopted, but your whole adoption came with this built-in expectation.
That's huge. This idea that he was chosen,
Right.
that his very existence hinged on this promise of education.
Isaacson tells this story about young Steve and a childhood friend, and she asks him, did your real parents not want you?
Oh, wow.
And it just hits Steve like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
This realization that maybe things weren't as straightforward as he thought.
And that's where his parents' response is so crucial.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't shy away from it at all.
Yeah.
They reinforced that, no, you were chosen.
We went out of our way for you.
Exactly.
Looks like they doubled down on this whole you're special thing.
Yeah.
But knowing you're special doesn't automatically make you a perfect student.
True. In Steve's case, maybe the opposite.
Right.
Isaacson paints this hilarious picture of young Steve being bored out of his mind in school.
Oh, yeah.
And we're not just talking, passing notes, daydreaming. This is next-level mischief.
Like planting explosives under his teacher's chair in the 3rd grade.
Now, obviously, we don't condone that,
Well,
but it speaks to a willingness to challenge authority, which anyone who knows Steve Jobs knows that's going to be a theme.
totally. And his parents, instead of, grounding him for life, they go to the school and they're like, it's your fault for not challenging him enough.
Talk about unwavering support.
Right. So was this unconventional upbringing like the secret sauce to his success later on? Or was it just Steve being Steve?
It's that classic nature versus nurture debate,
Right.
but fascinating to think about.
Totally. And this brings us to the spark that ignited Steve's love for technology, electronics.
Yeah.
His dad, Paul, was a whiz with mechanics. They'd spend weekends scouring junkyards,
Oh, wow.
looking for parts, learning to spot a deal.
Smart. Yeah.
You could say his dad was his first investor.
I like that.
Those trips weren't just about finding cheap parts, though. They were about understanding how things worked.
Absolutely. The craftsmanship, right?
Yeah.
Like under the hood, literally.
It's like that saying, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. But in this case, it was more like, if you want to understand something fully, you got to take it apart yourself.
Exactly. And not just take it apart, but put it back together.
Yes.
Figure out the why.
And that's where those Heathkit projects come in. These DIY electronics kits that were all the rage.
I remember those.
Right, like the gateway drug to Silicon Valley.
Mm.
But instead of building model airplanes,
Yeah.
Steve was building radios, amplifiers,
Yeah.
you name it. And these kits weren't just child's play.
No, not all.
They required some serious know-how.
Oh, absolutely.
Electronics, circuitry.
You really had to understand how things work together.
It's crazy to think
Yeah.
how these little projects kind of foreshadowed these massive challenges he'd tackle later on at Apple.
It's true.
Yeah.
And there's this one story Isaacson tells, the amplifier incident, it's called.
Okay.
Steve's working on one of these kits, convinced it doesn't need an amplifier.
Bold.
Right. And his dad, who, knows a thing or two about electronics himself, tells him he's wrong.
You're crazy.
Basically. But Steve, he sticks to his guns, proves his dad wrong.
No way.
Yeah. And according to Isaacson, that's a turning point for Steve, right?
Interesting.
That's when it clicks. I'm smarter than my dad.
At least when it comes to electronics.
At least when it comes to electronics, exactly. And you can just imagine how that kind of realization, it just fuels his confidence, this belief in his own abilities.
It's not arrogance if you can back it up, right?
Exactly. And Steve, he had the skills to prove it. Remember that story about him cold calling Bill Hewlett?
Hewlett, as in Hewlett-Packard, get out of here.
Hewlett-Packard, he needs a part for a frequency counter. And what does he do?
Calls up the big guy himself.
Calls up Bill Hewlett. Who does that? It's that audacity.
Very ballsy.
It's ballsy. And you know what? It works.
No.
Hewlett gives him the parts, offers him a summer job.
Shut up. See, I'm telling you, the
It's
universe,
like destiny.
it was pushing him towards Apple.
Totally.
But before Apple, there was this little thing called college.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Which his parents had sacrificed a lot for him to go.
They had.
And of course, Steve being Steve, he chooses Reed College.
One of the most expensive colleges in the country.
Top tier.
Top tier.
But it wasn't just about the name, right?
No. Not only.
This was the early 70s. Counterculture is in full swing.
Oh, yeah.
And Reed was the place to be if you were,
A free thinker.
yeah, a little rebellious.
Exactly.
Isaacson talks about how Eastern spirituality, it wasn't just some, like, fad at Reed.
Yeah.
It was practically part of the curriculum.
Wow.
Steve was reading up on Zen Buddhism, meditation.
Really diving in.
Even experimenting with psychedelics.
Whoa.
It's like that intersection of Eastern mysticism and, like, Silicon Valley innovation.
Yeah, it's a trip.
That's what makes his story so fascinating.
It's a unique blend.
And it's where we meet this guy, Robert Friedland.
Oh, yeah, Friedland.
Talk about a walking contradiction.
Tell me about it.
This is a guy who's preaching anti-materialism, right?
Right. But he's also making a killing in, wait for it, gold mining.
The irony.
I know. But Friedland, he plays a key role in Steve's journey.
He does.
Introduces him to the all-one farm commune.
Intense.
Intense is an understatement. We're talking barefoot Steve, pruning apple trees,
So weird.
meditating for hours.
Ow.
It's like something out of a movie, right?
Yeah, Italy.
But even with all this, like, counterculture stuff going on,
Yeah.
Steve, the tinkerer, never really went away.
Always building, always creating.
And that's where the legendary blue box story comes in.
Ah, the blue box.
You remember those things?
Vaguely.
You could make free long-distance calls.
Oh, yeah. Like hacking the system.
Exactly.
Okay.
And of course, Stephen Wozniak, his future Apple co-founder,
Dynamic duo.
they just had to build one.
Of course they did.
Isaacson. He says it wasn't just about the free calls, though.
What was it about then?
It was about understanding how the system worked,
Right.
bending technology to their will.
Having a little fun while they're at it.
Oh, yeah. They were calling the Vatican prank-calling strangers.
Classic.
It was like the ultimate rebellion,
I love it.
fueled by, a deep understanding of electronics.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. Isaacson suggests that this whole blue box thing,
Yeah.
it gave Steve a taste of the power of technology.
How so?
Like its ability to disrupt, to upend the status quo.
It's like their own little tech boot camp.
Right. They're honing their skills.
And this is like the 70s, the dawn of the personal computer.
Exactly. And building something like a blue box back then, that's not like plugging in a USB drive today.
No kidding.
That required serious skill, a deep understanding of how these things worked.
It's wild to see how those early experiences kind of paved the way for Apple.
Totally. It's all connected.
So we've got Steve, fresh out of this counterculture pressure cooker, armed with confidence and a healthy disregard for the rules.
What could possibly go wrong?
I'd say those blue box days, they were just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. Like a warm-up act for the main event.
Because now we're talking about Apple Computer,
Born in a garage in Los Altos, it's the classic Silicon Valley story, right?
the stuff of legends. This picture Isaacson paints. Steve, fresh off those counterculture adventures, teams up with Wozniak.
Working out of his parents' garage. Talk about humble beginnings.
But their mission, though, that was anything but humble. They wanted to build a computer for everyone.
Which back then, the whole idea of a personal computer, it was unheard of.
Computers were these massive things.
Hidden away in labs, corporate offices. You wouldn't have one in your home.
But Stephen they're on a mission to change all that. And they were doing it on a shoestring budget. Isaacson, he doesn't sugarcoat it.
Nope.
Steve sold his VW bus to get the cash. They're scrambling for parts, using credit.
Talk about pressure.
Even roped friends and family into assembling circuit boards.
In that tiny garage.
Talk about bootstrapping.
But it wasn't just about, slapping together a computer. Steve, he was obsessed with design. Making it simple, elegant.
Like those Cuisinart food processors.
Right. Those sleek, minimal designs. Steve saw that and thought, why not computers?
Leave it to Steve to find inspiration in a food processor.
But it makes sense, right? Because technology, it wasn't just about function for him. It had to be beautiful, intuitive.
Even joyful to use.
Exactly. And he wasn't afraid to be demanding to make that happen. Isaacson tells this story about how Steve rejected the first design for the Apple II's case because it wasn't insanely great.
Classic Steve.
Right. And sure, he could be tough to work with, but he got results. He understood that every detail mattered.
Even the parts no one would ever see.
Exactly, like the circuit board inside the Apple II. Steve insisted it had to be aesthetically pleasing.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. Straight lines, clean layout. He learned that from his dad, remember?
That's wild.
It's that attention to detail that set Apple apart. And then there's the reality distortion field.
Well, what?
The reality distortion field. This almost mythical ability Steve had to bend reality to his will.
Okay, now you're messing with me.
I'm serious. He was so convincing he could make you, his team, investors, even himself believe anything was possible.
So basically, he willed his ideas into existence.
Pretty much. But it wasn't magic. It was about having a vision and sticking to it no matter what.
And nowhere was that more apparent than with the Macintosh.
The Mac. That wasn't just a new computer, that was a revolution.
He got in a glimpse of the future at Xerox PXC.
Right. Exactly. That's where they were developing things like the graphical user interface, the mouse.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. This guy drops out of college, spends time on a commune, and then he's hanging out with the leading minds in tech, soaking up ideas that would shape the future.
He was like a sponge for new ideas, but he didn't just copy them, he synthesized them, made them his own.
And with the Macintosh, he saw a way to make computers accessible, intuitive, even artistic.
And he pushed his team incredibly hard to make it happen. The Macintosh team, they were working around the clock.
Driven by Steve's enthusiasm. And probably a little bit of fear, let's be honest.
Maybe a little. He could be ruthless. But he also inspired incredible loyalty. Everyone wanted to be part of something great.
And the Macintosh, with that iconic 1984 Super Bowl ad.
The pure genius.
That wasn't just a product launch, it was a cultural moment.
It changed everything.
But there's always a catch, isn't there?
Right. It wouldn't be a good story without one.
The Macintosh, it gets rave reviews, but sales are slow. And the board of directors, they're starting to get nervous.
They thought Steve's vision was too out there, too risky.
Which is where John Scully enters the picture.
Scully, the Pepsi guy. The one Steve lured to Apple with that famous line, "Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?"
Talk about a pitch.
Right. But those two, it was a recipe for disaster. Brilliant minds, but they were constantly clashing. Egos, visions, management styles. It was a power struggle waiting to happen.
And ultimately, the board sided with Scully.
Can you imagine?
Steve Jobs, at 30 years old, gets ousted from the company he built from the ground up.
That's got to be tough to swallow.
It's a good thing he was known for bouncing back, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And that's where Isaacson leaves us, really. At this point of failure, of uncertainty, it reminds us that even the greats, the innovators, they all face setbacks, make mistakes.
It's what they do next that defines them.
Exactly. So if you're fascinated by Steve Jobs, by Apple, by the power of innovation, dive into Isaacson's biography. It's a wild ride, trust me.
It makes you wonder, how different would things be if Steve had stayed at Apple? Or if he hadn't had those early experiences with adoption, with the counterculture, even with that blue box.
Right. Would he still be the Steve Jobs we know? It really makes you think.
That's the beauty of a deep dive like this, isn't it?
Yeah.
So much to unpack. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time.